Hi and welcome to the third challenge of this series, and the challenge is to count vowels. So what we want to do is we have an input string and what we want to return is going to be a number. So string is going to be the input and number is going to be the output. And the output is going to depend on how many vowel characters there are within that input string. So let's jump into JavaScript. This is the first language in which we're going to solve this, and let's see how we're going to go about this. So I need to have some sort of a container for my input string. I could call that container input string, and this could be any string. I'm just going to write programming. I'm going to have a container that's going to hold all of the vowels for me, and this is going to be A-E-I-O-U capital. Now, you could think of a method that is going to help you either lowercase or uppercase, and you can just have 5 vowels and then either lowercase all of them or uppercase all of them. But I want to include all of them right here because this is the way I'm going to go about this. And when we get to our TypeScript, I'm going to show you how you can implement that one as well. So I want to show you both ways. Now, we want to grab our input, check it against the vowels. If there is any of the characters of the input that matches our vowels, we want to have some sort of a vowel count, and we want to increase this. But initially the count is going to be 0. Let's say let, and in here, so I want to check one against the other. What I can do is I can say for const character of my input string, what do I want to do? I want to check if any character of my input string actually exists within my vowels. So I'm going to say if vowels dot includes any of the characters of my input string, then the only thing that I want to do is I want to grab my vowel count and I want to increase it. And that's it. That's basically the solution. So let's log this as well. I'm going to log our vowel count. Let's save this. And now the only thing I need to do is I need to do a node and run this. And there we go. We got 3. So even if I were to add like a small e and then a capital E, programming E at the end, save this and run this again, this should give us 5. And there we go. So we are effectively done with the JavaScript version of this solution. Now let's jump into the TypeScript version. Let's come right here. Now for TypeScript, as I said, I want to do something different. And for this one, I'm going to show you how to implement this if you were to use, if you were to come up with a different way. So what we want to do is we are going to have our vowels. So this is going to be const vowels. Instead of this being a string, we want it to be an array so we can iterate over it better. So we have A, E, and then I. After that, we have O, A-E-I-O-U. And that's it. Well, I'm not going to include the uppercase ones because I'm going to make sure that when I check the string, the characters of that string, I convert it to a lowercase. So here, after that, I need to still have my variable that is going to hold the count, and I'm going to call it vowel count. The initial value for this is going to be 0. Now, what do I want to do here? I'm going to use a for loop. We need to have the initial value for the loop agent or the loop variable, which I'm going to call I. And then we need to have our condition. So this loop agent is going to iterate over our input string, which I could call input stir, which we have not defined it. And I'm going to define that. It's going to iterate over it. And the way you can say it's going to iterate over it completely is you're going to say input string dot length. Now, what is this input string? I'm going to show you that. And after this, we are going to increment this by 1 because we want it to run for the length of that input. And this should be semicolon as well. So what do we want to do here? Now, what is this input string? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab everything, cut it, and I'm going to put it inside of a function. The input string is going to be the parameter that this function receives right here. And this is going to have a type of string. Now this function has a type of string, but what it returns is a number. So let's come right here. So what do I want to do here? I am iterating over my input string. And in each iteration, I want to check if this input string has something, some character that exists inside of my vowels. So for that, I'm going to say if vowels dot. Now, I want to check if that character exists inside of my vowels, but I don't want to return it. Remember? So I could use a different method that is index of. And if you take a look at this, it says it returns the index of the first occurrence of a value in an array, or -1 if it is not present. So if it is present, it's going to return the index. Otherwise, it's going to return -1. So what do we want to do here is we want to pass in our input string, and then you need to have your loop agent to iterate over that input string. Then we convert it to lowercase because we don't want to type both uppercase and lowercase letters in there. Now, from this, we don't want to return -1. So I'm going to say is not equal to -1. So give me the results that are not equal to -1. If it is -1, don't do anything. Now, this is going to effectively check if there are characters that match between our input string as well as our vowels array. It's going to check that for us. And I forgot to name this function. This is going to be count vowels. There we go. So after all of this is done, we are going to grab our vowel count and we're going to increase it by 1. Now, what do I want to return from this function is return vowel count. That's what I want to return. So this is a different way of going about it. Again, the reason that we can use index of is because we are not looking for the actual character. We just want to check if it exists. We increment the number of vowel count. And now the only thing we need to do is we need to run our function. So I'm going to grab this variable result. I'm going to call my function and I'm going to pass in my string, which is programming. And then let's log this result. This should give us 3. Now, to be able to do this, the first thing that we need to do is we need to convert this into JavaScript. Let's hit enter. There we go. We got no errors. That's very good. And then I'm going to say node b-.js. And there we go. We got 3. So if I were to do the same test, lowercase and uppercase, save this, run this line, and then run this line, I got 5. So the TypeScript solution is also done. Let's jump in and let's talk about the Python one. And by now you can see the idea is the same. We are going to have some sort of a variable or container that is going to hold our input string, which could be anything. We are going to have some sort of a variable or container that is going to hold our vowels. And then what we want to do next is also we need to take a look at the count. So we are going to say vowel underscore count. The way we do it is a little bit different, but the idea is the same. So you need to have all 3 variables. Now, how did we go about this in JavaScript or in TypeScript? We basically checked all of the characters of the input against our vowels. So I'm going to say for char in input string, what do I want to do if I find anything? So if I find anything, I want to check if that character is inside of my vowels. If it is inside of my vowels, now keep in mind, Python doesn't have curly braces and that sort of thing. It just has indentation. So if you do colon and then hit enter, you can see it's getting indented. Then I want to grab my count and I want to increase it by 1. And that's it. So let's get out of this. And the way we print is we are going to say print vowel count. Let's save this. Let's run this file, Python C. And there we go. We got 3. And by far, you can see the Python has the shortest and sweetest and most concise syntax of all of them. And there we go. Let's add E. I just added E, lowercase and uppercase, and because I want to check that as well. And there we go. We got 5. So now that Python solution is done, let's jump into the next one, which is Go. So again, it is the same idea. So let's just go ahead and get started with implementing this. What I'm going to do is we need to have our main package first. So package main. After that, we are going to create basically our main function. So this is going to be func main. What is this function going to do? The job of this function is to hold my input string. I could call this input string as I did. I'm going to use our short variable declaration and I'm going to say, okay, this is programming. And then what I want to do next is I want to log this to the console. I want to print it there. But we need to actually implement the functionality of how to count the specific number of vowels within this string. So for that, I'm going to create a different function. I'm going to call it count vowels, and this function is going to accept a string. The type of that is going to be string. Type that correctly. But what this function is going to return is not going to be a string. It's going to be an integer. And now we can see, because this has typing, much like TypeScript, it goes in the same way. It accepts a string, but then it returns an integer. We need to have our specific container to hold our count. And now, since this function accepts a string, we can iterate over that string. So I'm going to say for character, I'm going to pass in before the character a space, and before that space, I'm going to put in a comma and then an underscore. So the underscore basically gives me the index, and the char, the character, is going to give me that character. Now, I don't want to have the index. I just want to have the character because I want to check it against my input string. Now, you might argue we did the same thing in TypeScript where we check the index, but the index, it said, does it exist or it doesn't exist? It basically gave us a way to know whether it existed or not. It didn't return the index for us. We didn't care about the index. We just cared for that Boolean evaluation. And that's the same thing that we do here. We don't care about the index, we just care about the Boolean evaluation. And in here, I'm going to use range. Range is going to iterate over our string. Our string is called stir. And in each iteration, what do we want to do? We want to take a look at whether or not that exists. So our expression is going to be our character char, and what is going to be our condition? What do you think the condition is? The condition is every individual vowel. So I'm going to come right here. I could copy 5 of them from here, put it right here, and then I could just keep on typing the other 5. And we have O. This should be here. This should be here. We need to have a comma. AE. We need to have I, and then we need to have U. A-E-I-O-U. And now let me just convert all of these double quotes into single quotes so we don't have any errors. And there we go. Save that. So we have this case. If any of this is true, what do we want to do? We want to grab our count and we want to increment it by 1. So that's what we did in our for loop. And then what do we want to return from the function? We want to return however many counts there are. And we should be done. The only thing else that we need to do is we need to call this function right here. So for this one, I'm going to say, give me count vowels. And then to the count vowels, I'm going to pass in our input string. Now I want to print this to the console. So I'm going to say fmt.print line, and then I'm going to pass that in there. Let's save it. We don't have any errors. That's a good thing. And now let's run this. So I'm going to say go run. What is the name of the file? d-tap. Let's hit run. It's going to take a few seconds the first time. There we go. We got 3. So we do our usual check, lowercase e, uppercase e, save it, and then run it again. And we got 5. Very good, right? So you can see there were some similarities, especially with TypeScript, the way we go about it. But here I used a switch statement. I could have used a switch statement here as well, but I used a built-in method, which was index of. So depending on the language, you need to adapt to the methods and the techniques that that specific language offers you. Now, we're going to go to our Rust, and the Rust solution is going to look a lot like the Go solution. So for Rust, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to say fn main. This is going to hold our input string, which is programming. And then we need to basically call the function in here. Now I am going to create a function called count_vowels. Please pay attention to the naming convention of these languages. So I'm going to have count vowels, and this is going to accept a string. I could call it stir. And then the type of this is going to be a string slice. We want to manipulate it, take a look at it, count it, but we don't want to take ownership. That's why I'm using slice. But what this function returns is an unsigned integer. That's what we want this to return for us. So we need to have our count, and the initial value is going to be 0. But then you need to have the let keyword to initialize it. And then this count is going to change, meaning this is mutable, so you need to add the mut keyword in there. So after this, we have the functionality or the logic of the loop iterating over different characters. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for character inside of our string, if there is any character inside of our string, we want to iterate over that. So we're going to use the chars method. And when we iterate over it, we want to take a look at a matching pattern. So I'm going to say match char. What do we want char to be matched with? We want it to be matched with our character, with our vowels. So I could grab the vowels from here, copy it, come right here, paste that in here. But then it's not going to have commas in front of it. It's going to have the OR operator, because we are checking if any of these exists. If any of these exists, we want to grab our count and we want to increment it by 1. But what if none of these exist within that string? So if I'm taking a look at the P character, P doesn't exist in here. What do I want to do? Basically nothing. I want to return nothing from the function. And this is how you do it in Rust. So I don't want to return anything from the function. And this underscore and then our fat arrow, this is going to check for all unmatched cases, and then it's going to do nothing. The parentheses basically means return void, don't return anything. So the parentheses in here, they effectively act as the void type for TypeScript. And then we're going to get outside of our loop. What do we want to return from this function? We just want to return count. Now let's print this. I'm going to say print line. This is going to be a macro for us. We're going to grab our display and let's call the function count vowels. And what do we want to pass to the function? Our input string. Let's save this. Now to run this, the first thing that we need to do is we need to convert it into an executable. And we have an error. We didn't actually terminate our statements. We need to terminate them. For here, I'm going to pass in a comma. There is going to be a comma in there. We need to terminate this one as well. Let's save this. Let's run this again. And there we go. We got our executable. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to run our executable. And now it should give me 3. There we go. And now we do our test, lowercase e, uppercase e, save this. Let's first compile it and then run our executable. We got 5. There we go. So this is how you calculate the number of vowels within an input string in 5 different languages. And this wraps up this challenge of this series. See you in the next one.